you perceive the world through a structure of value that is essentially a map of the territory. So when you look out at the world, you think, well, there's the world, there's the objective world. But obviously you don't just see the objective world, because we wouldn't have had to develop science to give us a picture of the objective world if you just saw the objective world. Mm-hmm. It's actually pretty damn difficult to formalize an objective picture of the world. So if you don't see the objective world, well, what is it that you see? Well, a lot of what you see, a tremendous amount of what you see, is memory. Like, you don't know that, but your brain uses memory to represent things whenever it can, because seeing the world is unbelievably challenging neurologically. And so we exercise the use of our central vision very selectively. We only look at what's important. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what's important is what's valuable. Well, you don't know that you're making an unbelievably complex, value-laden decision whenever you look at something. It's actually the frame through which you see the world. And it's a map. And the reason for that is, well, you have to do things. You have to get from point A to point B. Now, I derive part of this theory in Maps of Meaning from a book called The Neuropsychology of Anxiety by Jeffrey Gray. Gray developed a theory of emotion that's predicated on the idea that most of your emotions are experienced in relationship to a goal.
Okay.
And so you establish a goal, then movement towards that goal, or evidence that you could move towards that goal, makes you happy, produces positive emotion, whereas evidence that the goal is invalid or that you're blocked in some way produces negative emotion. Mm-hmm. So you lay this map on the world. It always has a destination point in mind. There's always a destination point implicit in it or explicit in it. So it works as subtly as this, for example. So if you walk into your room and you want to walk towards something to pick it up, and your room is cluttered because you've been careless, all that clutter manifests itself as an obstacle to your goal and produces negative emotion. And you experience that instantaneously, essentially, and automatically. And so part of the reason, that I encourage people to clean up their rooms, let's say, is, well, it's a microcosm of all this. Your room is part of your experience that you have control over. And it's easy to underestimate its significance, but that's a place you can alter. You can set it up for whatever it is that you're doing. Well, what are you doing? Well, that's the first question you have to ask yourself if you're going to set up your room. It's not trivial. It's hard.
You really think you have the capacity to bend the structure of reality without it eventually snapping back and hitting you in the face? Like, how arrogant can you possibly be to think that? And so, well, I came to believe that truth in particular, spoken truth, but not only spoken truth, was the antidote to that evil and to that suffering. Really, truly the antidote to that. It's more complex than that, but that's something. And I also came to believe that each of us have far more under our dominion in terms of the destiny of the world, let's say, than we would ever even care to dare to dread, let's say. I don't know how it works, but each of us, we make decisions between heaven and hell all the time. With every decision, in fact. With every decision. That's a decision, up or down. And in some manner, the whole collective enterprise is guided by those individual decisions. And it's not washed away in the mix, it's somehow not just your trivial action in a sea of 7 billion random actions. We're networked, and our actions echo, and what we do or don't do, or what we do deceitfully, has ramifications far beyond what we can immediately see, or often are willing to immediately see. It's like, the only more frightening realization than nothing you do matters is the realization that everything you do matters. It's like you want to pick an existential terror. You think meaninglessness is terrifying. You try its opposite, and you'll see how terrifying that is. But it's a terror. It's a holy terror, right? It's a terror that sustains and ennobles. And every single person knows that that is true. Knows that you're fleeing from your destiny by avoidance of the necessary responsibility that your conscience calls you towards. And we toy with it because we can, and we try to avoid it because we test, we're immature, and we're bitter often, and it's not surprising because people suffer dreadfully, and it's very difficult to suffer dreadfully without becoming bitter, but it doesn't help. All it does is make the suffering worse and spreads it, and if the suffering is morally objectionable, spreading it is hardly going to rectify that. And so, yeah, I'm optimistic about our possibilities because I think we can do anything we set our minds to. And so, hopefully, we'll set our minds to the proper things. And every single one of you have to make that decision.
Genuine ethical virtue is it's the only source of resilience and strength that you have. And it's also the place, as far as I can tell, that the meaning that allows you to set yourself against suffering resides. People talk about life and its meaning, and they say, well, life is meaningless, but people never mean that, because if you're in pain or you're terrified, you're overwhelmed with meaning. It's just not the kind of meaning you want. And it's not a reality you can talk yourself out of easily. And that's particularly true of pain, but it can also be true of anxiety. And so the question is there a reliable source of meaning that you can set against that? And what's its nature, if so? And so here's a way of conceptualizing it to some degree. So I'm currently in a rather remote location in northern Ontario. And one of the advantages to being here is that I can go out on my dock at night and I can look up and see the night sky. And when you see the night sky, when it's pitch black, you are face to face with something as near to the infinite as we can face in a prosaic day-to-day setting. And so there's an experience that goes along with that, and the experience is one of awe and wonder. And awe is a very interesting emotion. Let's say it's unbelievably ancient from a biological perspective. So if you feel awe, your hair might stand up on end. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you get that feeling, chills running down your back, say when you're listening to music that you particularly enjoy. And that's a variant of the reflex that prey animals have when they see a predator. Their hair stands on end so that they look bigger. Now, of course, they don't know that. So part of that feeling of awe is tied to our ancient mammalian heritage. It's a variation of the response we had to a predator. We're in the face of we're facing something much greater than ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so, but there's more to it if you think it through, because when you face the night sky, for example, or you confront something that fills you with wonder and awe, there's also a call to action that's sort of implicit in it. And maybe you think, well, the wolf is calling to the rabbit to be better at defending itself in some sense, to be a better rabbit, because otherwise, man, you're going to be eaten by the wolf. And when you look up in the night sky, to the night sky, and you feel awe, there's a call there. It's part of that experience to imitate that great thing that you perceive. Now, you might say, well, how can you imitate the infinite cosmos as well? Obviously, that's a very complicated question. But, you're a very complicated thing. And God only knows what it means for you to imitate the infinite when you apprehend it. I mean, in some sense, that's the fundamental question of life, is how do we adapt ourselves to the infinite complexity that surrounds us? What must we become? Well, you don't merely think that through. And I mean, you don't, I don't, human beings in general don't. We puzzle it out, and we use all sorts of information to do that. And some of these more primordial experiences that are outside the domain of strict rationality nonetheless point us in an ethical direction. And the ethic would be you should and could be more than you are. Well, then the question is, how do you bring that to earth? How does that look when you try to embody it day to day? Well, I would say these are obviously not my ideas. They're very old ideas. Well, maybe you ally yourself with truth to the degree that you can. Maybe you pursue beauty. Maybe you pursue the love that attaches you appropriately to other people, etc., etc. And you do that because, well, I think you do it because life is very, very difficult.